Hi everybody, a really warm welcome tonight. My name is Mark Radford, I'm the Chief Nurse of HEE and also Deputy CNO. I'd really like you to welcome to our fantastic seminar and webinar that we've got today, specifically aimed at our student midwifery colleagues. I know that we've been running a series of webinars related to supporting students in placement, which is really well attended by colleagues from the nursing community, but we've had lots and lots of requests and ideas and questions for our student midwives, and I am absolutely delighted that we have got a phenomenal, stellar lineup of people coming on to talk today. But I firstly wanted to kind of reflect upon the fact that I really understand that this is a really difficult time for many student nurses, many student midwives who really are wanting to be part of our national response in terms of supporting our nation in delivering the best healthcare we can during this COVID response. But I completely understand that this has been a really challenging time also for our student midwives in terms of their course, their progression, and also their fantastic academic attainments to make sure that you're able to continue with your studies and your education. So I know for many of you this has been a difficult decision to opt into practice and be supported. But we've been working really hard as a system to really engage with all of your universities and student midwife colleagues up and down the country, but also importantly, Health Education England, NHS Improvement in England, the Royal College of Midwives, the NMC, and importantly, the Council of Deans, who have played a huge part, all of them, in developing the national policy in the support of student midwives and the ability for you to contribute to women's health and importantly to maternity services up and down the country during COVID. Now, I know HEE has played a role in terms of supporting each of those stakeholders and partners and playing a coordinating role to make sure that we can get things right for you as students, but also importantly to support your universities and make sure your studies and importantly your clinical experience is really the high quality that we would expect it to be, even though we are working in unprecedented times. So part of it has really been about linking through with our nursing midwifery colleagues at the NMC. I'm delighted that we've got a colleague joining us today to go through those, but also importantly the Royal College of Midwives, who have been vital in terms of making sure that your experience as midwives and also importantly your role as future midwives in our services as students are really well represented in how we define and develop policy. So it's absolutely fantastic and also really important that we've actually got two student midwife colleagues joining us today to talk about their own experiences alongside the system leaders. And I think that's really important to recognise that this is absolutely about a clear focus on the student midwife experience. And so today we are absolutely delighted to have, like I say, a stellar lineup of colleagues who have joined us today, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce them. And firstly, our Chief Midwife, our Chief Midwifery Officer for England, Professor Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent, a fantastic colleague, but also a phenomenal role model for midwives across the country. I'm delighted that Jacqueline has been able to join us today. Alongside Jacqueline is Sally Ashton-May, who's part of our national team in Health Education England and the senior midwife for our organisation, who works hand in glove across the system with Jacqueline and others in developing and supporting education practice for midwifery. And our two student midwife colleagues, and I'm really delighted that we've got Alicia Burnett, who's a third-year student midwife, and Rachael Dewey, who's also a third-year student midwife. And it's absolutely fantastic they've taken the time out today, not only from their practice and studies, but also importantly to talk about their experiences and how they've helped shape our work. But alongside that is a really valued colleague from Royal College of Midwives, Birte Harlev-Lam, a friend and colleague who we've worked together for many years, and I know always has midwifery and professional standards at her heart when we work together at NHS Improvement. By now in her very clear role as Executive Director for Professional Leadership at the Royal College of Midwives, will have a great deal to say. And also Jacqui Williams, a fantastic senior midwifery advisor at Nursing Midwifery Council, and again a key partner in helping us develop and shape strategy in particularly during these challenging times, to support midwives and also importantly student midwives and academic midwives in delivering a response in relation to COVID. But that's enough about me. I'm going to hand over to my fantastic colleague Sally Ashton-May, who's going to be helping us through the next hour, helping the panel guide you through a series of questions, and also importantly to make sure that we respond to all of your queries that have been raised with us prior to the webinar today. So Sally, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and welcome to everybody. I'm absolutely privileged, as Mark has said, to be able to share this opportunity with the fantastic panel that we've got, and also with all of you that are online with us listening, and those that will watch us as we follow this up with a YouTube video. So if you haven't been able to join us tonight, we'll hope that we'll be able to share this with you and your colleagues beyond that. Mark's given really good introductions to the panel, but I thought it'd be really nice if everyone just had the opportunity just to say hello and tell us who they are themselves. So I'd like to start with our students, if that's all right. I'm going to hand over to Alicia first, please.
Thank you very much, Sally. Good evening, everybody. My name is Alicia Burnett, and I'm a third-year student midwife at the University of West London, and I'm also the co-editor of the Student Midwife Journal.
Thank you, Alicia. And Rachel?
Hello, my name is Rachael Dewey. I'm a third-year Master Midwifery student at Edinburgh Napier. So I'm based up here in Scotland, and I'm the current chair of the Royal College of Midwives Student Midwife Forum.
Fantastic, thank you, Rachel. And we've got Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent is on the telephone, so unfortunately we can't see her, but Jacqueline, over to you.
Hello, and apologies if you can't see me. It's the technology, not my will. My name's Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent, and I'm the Chief Midwifery Officer for the NHS in England, and I'm delighted to be able to contribute tonight, and look forward to speaking with you as the evening unfolds.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And Birte Harlev-Lam?
Schoolgirl error, I was muted. So good evening, and my name is Birte Harlev-Lam. I'm the Executive Director for Professional Leadership at the Royal College of Midwives, and I'm also really looking forward to discussing some of the issues that student midwives are having, and hopefully we can help you with the answers.
Thank you, Birte. And again on the phone, Jacqui Williams, please, from the NMC.
Hello everyone, I'm delighted to be here. I'm one of the Senior Midwifery Advisors at the Nursing and Midwifery Council. Heavily involved in standards development as well as supporting the education programme, but my key role of course is to inform the NMC across all directorates about midwifery matters to ensure midwifery is very high profile.
Thank you, Jacqui, that's fantastic, and thank you to all of our panel. We'll move into some questions now, but as Mark said, we've received lots and lots of really interesting questions, questions that we really want to be able to answer for you. So we'll do our best this evening between the panel. We'll do the best that we can for you now. Anything that we can't capture this evening, either because we haven't got time or because we need to get some further information for you, we will pull together in some questions and answers, and we'll direct you to our midwifery specific page at HEE, which has been launched today. So you'll find the answers to your questions and signposted to lots of different resources. So we'll share that with you again after the webinar. So Rachel, if I could hand over to you first, please. I believe you've got a question for Mark.
Yes, so I've got this question for Mark. It's basically around the collaboration between nursing and midwifery, and obviously nurses and student nurses do vital work, and I obviously think they're fabulous. Both my parents are nurses, but student midwives often feel left out of the dialogue sometimes, and especially during the release of information around COVID and the NMC's changes to the emergency register. So my question is just about including student midwives from your perspective, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. It's a great question, and one of the key things for us is recognising that actually midwives are a completely independent and separate profession from nursing, and it's really important that actually both the policy that we sorted and agreed with Councillor Deans and the Nursing Midwifery Council was very, very specifically related to the requirements of both professions. And so Jacqueline and others have worked really hard to make sure that nationally our our policies are very distinct for each group. That has meant that certainly for our midwifery colleagues, we had to do a little bit more work in terms of the policy, because obviously the course requirements both in the second and third year are a little bit different, quite different in fact, for our nursing colleagues. So we took a little bit more time to work through the information. It's probably a week or two behind our nursing colleagues, but it was reflective, importantly, of the two distinctions in the two professions, but also importantly the nature of the course in the final 3 years, final third year, and what we needed to do ensuring the placements were right, and we had engagement from our trusts and providers to make sure that your experiences as students critically reflected the uniqueness of the contribution, but also the course structure that midwives have.
Thank you, Mark. I think Alicia is next to ask a question.
I think that's for Birte, Alicia, I think.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of information and guidance out there, but a lot of it feels very nursing focused. Is it possible to have more midwifery specific information in one place?
Thank you very much for your question, Alicia. Absolutely, and in fact on the Royal College of Midwives on our website there is a page specifically for students which has a number of different things. It's for students, and in fact it's also for educators. So if you are talking to your university lecturers and they are not necessarily having the answers that you need, it might be worth directing them to that page as well. But the question and answers are set out in a way where there are questions that specifically relate to first year students, specifically to second year students, and specifically for third year students, and actually for the third year students even splitting that between the first 6 months of your practice and the last 6 months, because we know that some of the advice and guidance around placements, etc., are actually different depending on whether you're in the first or the second half of your training in the third year. There's also some videos on there, and there are some other resources that you can access. And the other thing, of course, that we do is we are sending out a fortnightly student midwife newsletter specifically to student midwives to help them go through this. But I'm sure there is more we can do, and of course we will take away any messages we get from today to see how we can improve what we do.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Thank you, Birte. Rachael, does that answer your question as well? Because I know you had a question for Birte specifically around first year student midwives.
Hi, yeah, I think Bertie's answered that really well, and I am aware that the RCM has been producing lots of really good learning resources for student midwives.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
About the first year cohorts who are just in theory, perhaps I would like to put to Bertie just about ways in which first years can still be engaged in clinical practice, even though they are unable to participate in clinical practice in real life at the moment.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I think the first year students are probably the ones who are sitting in maybe the most unusual position during this crisis. And one of the things I would say is that it's really important for those first year students to keep in contact with their personal tutors, with their peers as they're going through this this crisis, because it can be quite lonely, especially when they're not actually in clinical practice. So the first years will have access to all of our iLearn modules, and a lot of those are very clinically focused. So I would really recommend using those and really just think about how much you can access both some webinars, videos, and just online general learning to try and just keep a little bit focused on what it would be like to be in practice. Again, as I said, we've got the newsletter, and I would certainly recommend the question and answer session, really thinking about those questions specific for first years. But I think keeping in touch with your personal lecturer in the university is really, really key, but also talking to your peers. We are worried that first year students are going to feel very left out, and it is something that we're addressing. And Rachael knows through the Student Midwife forum that we have at the Royal College of Midwives, it's something we are talking about there as well.
Thank you, Birte, that's excellent. Alicia, I think you'd like to ask Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent a question now.
Yes, I would. Good evening, Jacqueline. My question is, the pandemic.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Oh, there's a bit of feedback. Shall I continue?
Yeah, again, Alicia. Yeah.
Oh, I've got it. I'm in.
Ah, fantastic. Good evening, Jacqueline. My question for you is, the pandemic has resulted in significant changes to the way that maternity services are delivered, but not all of these changes are negative. For example, home birth is receiving increasing attention as a birthing option, and midwives are harnessing technology to find new ways to deliver care. Which positive changes would you like to remain in place once the state of emergency is lifted?
Thank you, Alicia. That's a really important and significant question at this very, very challenging, and I didn't want to say the word unprecedented because I hear it so much and I find myself in that space using that word. But at this challenging time, maternity providers have had to think very, very quickly about how they ensure safety for all women, regardless of postcode, regardless of ethnicity, socioeconomic status, regardless of whether they're articulate or not, regardless. Heads and directors of midwifery, maternity providers have worked really, really hard to try and ensure safety for everybody, and that means that they've had to make some changes. And you know, it's very well known, of course it is, that there have been suspension of home birth services. For example, as you've mentioned, some birth options have been reduced because of the challenges of ensuring that everybody has safe and personal care in this COVID-19 coronavirus space. So many things have happened in relation to Meet Anywhere, for example, meetings online, bookings and antenatal consultations online. There have been, we have from NHS England, 8,000 self-blood pressure monitoring machines that are given out freely to maternity providers to give women a degree of autonomy at home. Antenatal education is being delivered in an innovative way. So there's lots and lots of things, as you've quite rightly said, that have been changed to accommodate and to ensure safe maternity care.
Unknown participant is now joining.
What I would like to say is that we could say, yes, let's continue with all of the above, but the very sensible and most safe thing to say is that we have to evaluate these changes in relation to what women perceive, what women experience, and the impact of these changes on that pregnancy journey. We also have to evaluate how that impact has made a difference to how maternity services run in terms of risk, in terms of impact, a little bit of process evaluation as well. And once we've done all that, then I could reliably say, as your Chief Midwifery Officer, that we would be really happy to support that particular initiative to continue in the post-COVID space. So a rather long answer, but the short answer is evaluation, process, impact and outcome. What do the women perceive? What were the incidental findings? Was it safe? Was the process good? And the same for maternity services. And once we've got those answers, of course, we would be delighted to say, let's run with that particular initiative from a safety perspective.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Alicia, does that answer your question?
Fantastic answer. Thank you very, very much, Jacqueline.
Comprehensive answer. Thank you, Jacqueline. Rachel, I think you've got a question for Jacqui Williams of the NMC.
Yeah, so hi Jacqui.
Hi Rachel.
So my question is just from my role in the SMF and from listening to student experiences across the UK, there seems to be quite different approaches to the implementation of the emergency measures, depending on which nation you live in and the university you go to. For example, the hours that you're able to do, or how the 80 to 20% theory is managed, what student-specific roles are. So my question is just why isn't there more consistency in this?
I mean, that's a really interesting question, isn't it, Rachel? Because broadly, when programmes are approved, they have to meet our standards. but that certainly allows a difference across the sector in terms of how programmes are put together and how they are presented. And that also applies with the emergency standards, because universities currently have the opportunity to decide whether they want to indeed adopt the standards or whether they want to continue. We've made it far more a simple process for any change they might want to do. But of course, with them all sort of starting not from the same baseline, you will see differences across the piece broadly. And it will be very much a local decision for the university to decide how they want to change their programmes going forward and adopting these new standards. I think that doesn't probably resolve the issue in some respects, but I hope it helps to understand why the universities, because it's actually up to the university how they want to deliver the programmes.
Thank you, Jacqui. You've added a lot of clarity to that for students. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Jacqui. Alicia, I think you wanted to follow up with a question for Jacqui as well.
Yes, this question is actually for Jacqui and yourself, Sally.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes. Some third-year students have said that they feel as though they don't really have a choice as to whether to opt in or opt out. And if students want to actually finish their course on time, they feel as though they have to opt in.
Jacqui, would you like to pick up on that first?
Yes, I mean, our starting point was really from two key principles, that within this emergency period, we still want to try wherever possible to support students to deliver get their programmes completed on time and join our register. And everything that we're trying to do with our partner stakeholders are to try and avoid as much disruption where possible, but obviously that can be difficult. I think the other principle that we held is it has to be an individual decision. From the student's own point of view, their own personal circumstances, those of their families. So those really are our two key principles. I think it's a very difficult decision that some students perhaps can't continue being in practice at this time, and others are doing an amazing job in terms of adapting to try and keep their programmes different. But I think I'm sure Sally will support me in saying is that we don't want people to feel that they have no choice. It is an individual decision, and hopefully you have discussed this, whatever choice you make, very carefully with your midwifery lecturers to make sure it's the right choice for you.
Absolutely, Jacqui, I'd agree with that. And from HEE's perspective, you know, our role is to support the students, you know, to implement the NMC emergency standards to make sure that you're able to meet your curriculum in the way that your HEIs are delivering it. And certainly we want to value all of our students in exactly the same way. So whether you've opted in or opted out, whether you're pausing, our midwifery student population is very important to us. So from an HE perspective, we are happy to support whichever decision that you take and help your organisations to help you to get to the point you want to be, which is ultimately qualifying and joining us on the NMC register. So I think this is an opportune time now. We've had some questions, and thank you, panel. We'll come back for some more, but we'd like to take this opportunity now to have some feedback from Alicia and from Rachel about you, about your personal experiences, about being a student midwife, what COVID's meant to you, what your role is in the student community. So it's kind of over to you. We're really thrilled to hear what you've got to say. We had a little fun with this earlier on, so I'm just going to throw it out there now. Who's first?
I can go first.
Go on, Alicia, thank you.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a third year student midwife, and I've actually had to make the decision to opt out. And as I'm sure many other student midwives can attest to, I have felt some guilt around having to make this decision. And I spent the first few weeks at home not quite knowing what to do with myself, because everything was a bit up in the air with regards to how my course would actually progress. But I actually took it upon myself to think up ways to support my student midwife colleagues, both out in clinical practice and both those that I've had to opt out like myself. and I came up with an idea for a blog. So I started the COVID-19 cohort blog, which is an opportunity for student midwives all over the world to share their experiences of how COVID-19 is affecting their personal lives and their midwifery education. And it's been really fascinating. The things that I'm hearing from students, a student in London is having a similar experience to a student in Iran. A student in Nepal is having a similar experience to a student in Scotland. So it's really interesting, the themes that have been coming out of the work that I'm doing.
Oh, that's incredible, really exciting, Alicia. What were the kind of key themes that you've identified that are similar across the piece?
Okay, remote learning is a huge theme. So globally, a lot of student midwives have been pulled from clinical practice. So quite a few of us are undertaking remote learning exclusively or remote learning in conjunction with clinical practice. And the challenge that has come out of that is the challenge of homeschooling children whilst you're actually undertaking remote learning yourself. So that's a theme that's come out of it. But there's also been a theme of excitement at the prospect of being able to participate as student midwives on the front line. That's also been a really strong theme.
Fantastic. And for your current situation, Alicia, I understand you're hoping now to opt in. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've been supported to do that?
Yes, I've been at home for 6 weeks now. So my clinical practice facilitator and my trust, she's amazing. And I emailed her about a week ago to ask her if there was any prospect of my moving out of home into accommodation so that I can continue to shield my loved ones and then also participate in clinical practice. So I'm working on that. My university, the University of West London, I cannot fault my lecturers. They've been so supportive. And my advice to any student midwife out there listening, use your sources of support. So your family, your friends, your university and your clinical practice areas. We're all here for you.
Thank you, Alicia. That's fabulous. I'd like to ask the panel now, does anyone have a question for Alicia? I'm sure you do. It's really inspirational, Alicia, to see that you've taken a situation that wasn't ideal for you and you've turned it around to the benefit of not only yourself, but for a huge population of students.
Sally, it's Jacqui Williams. Can I just make a comment? I mean, I just think, you know, you've had to make a really very difficult decision during this time, and I'm sure it's been very disappointing, but fantastic work that you're going to be doing. You are developing skills that you perhaps didn't realise that you would develop or have the opportunity to develop, so don't underestimate that. And I'm sure everybody will work with you to get you back on track to make sure you do qualify, albeit perhaps a little bit later. So, but well done for what you're doing.
Thank you, Jacqui.
Thank you very much.
Bertie's got a question, I think. Bertie, did you say you had a question?
Sally, I've got one if we're waiting.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay, yeah, Jacqueline, would you like to go ahead and then Bertie?
Alicia, it's not a question, it's a comment. I think we should watch this space. This is a leader in the making where you couldn't work clinically. You sat thinking, what can I do? This work sounds absolutely phenomenal, and I really would value it if you could share some of the outputs once you get to that part of your analysis, by engaging with student midwives in the other countries. So whether it's bullet points, whether it's notes, or whether it's whatever you turn it into, I would be really interested in looking at that. And I think a leader in the making. Let's watch this space.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And
Thank you very much.
So I also just wanted to say, you know, well done, Alicia, and just probably also maybe more of a comment than a question, but just thinking about student midwives in year 1 and year 2, and are you getting feedback, and are people making contact with you who are in different stages of their training?
Yes, and that's the really interesting thing. I've heard from third years, first years, second years, and students on the shortened program. So qualified nurses who are now doing the shortened course to become midwives.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much, because I think as we at the Royal College of Midwives are trying to support and help students in at different stages of their career, it'd be really interesting, again, as Jacqueline's already said, but to link in and just see how it will give us a good feeling for how students in different aspects of their training, how they're feeling. Thank you.
Thank you, Birte. If none of the panel have any further questions, we'll hand over to Rachael now, who's got an equally inspiring but slightly different story.
So just like Alicia, I was faced with the decision of choosing to opt in or opt out, and luckily for me, which is not to be taken for granted, I was able to opt in, and I've been very supported in order to opt in. At my university, we have 4 weeks of theory left to study, and I've got a master's level dissertation due in summer. So my university has negotiated a reduced hours contract, so I'm able to do 23 hours a week on my extended paid placement. But I'm also going to be able to balance that with my studies as a third year. So for me personally, my experience has actually worked out to be very beneficial and manageable as a student, because we obviously still have a lot of theory left to undertake and to allow us to become qualified midwives. I'm doing my placement in the area which I've trained in for 3 years. So again, that's also a really lucky thing for me, because I know the team, I know the area, and since I've arrived on this paid placement, whilst I know the team, they've been welcoming and supportive. Our practice education facilitator, she has worked out a rotational hub and spoke placement for the extended placement students. So it means that I'm doing 5 weeks in one area. So I'm currently on the postnatal ward. Then I'll do 5 weeks in another area, and so on and so forth, until obviously the end of this placement, and then I qualify. And this has been a great experience so far for us, because it means that we're still being valued as students, in the sense that we're going to learn, more, as much as we can prior to qualifying. And it's the same for the second year students who are out in practice as well. Through the SMF, it's been really interesting for me personally to see my own experience, but also put that from a UK-wide perspective. So I'm very aware of the different experiences of students across the whole 4 nations. And to be honest, the key part of my experience, why it's been so beneficial so far, is just that I'm being supported where I go to work. So every day, I don't feel nervous, because even though COVID is out there, our area is dealing with it. The team is an inclusive, supportive environment, and being treated with kindness at work. And I think that's for all students. If midwives and their management teams can provide that, then students will have a great experience on their placements.
Thank you, Rachael. And I was following you on Twitter earlier today, and I loved your tweet there about I'm excited to go to work and can't wait to go on my placement. And I think, what you've just articulated there is really a good demonstration of the experience that you're having. How do you think your role's changed, Rachael? Because we know some of your student colleagues are anxious about going on to what they call a paid student placement, and their expectation is that might be very different. How have you found it? So
personally, I haven't experienced that my role's changed at all. I'm a third year student. I'm going into work in my student midwife capacity, and I'm being supervised by a midwife who I work with throughout the shift. And we've always, according to your level of training, you are granted some level of independence. So that is brilliant, and you do have that with this placement. But taking away the supernumerary status, I personally don't feel that anything has changed for me. I feel just as supported, just as able to learn on the job as I did before. However, back to my previous point, that does depend on the support structures of your workplace environment.
Absolutely, thank you. Birte, you had a question?
Actually, this is definitely a comment, and it's really to both of you. But I think what you've both demonstrated actually is that communication is key. So rather than thinking there's one way of doing this, opting in or opting out, depending on what year you're in, that actually if you talk to your university, if you talk to your placement provider, and think about what you need to make this possible and work in the best way that you can for you, I'm just really thrilled to hear that you've been able to, both of you, you've been able to manage what is a really difficult situation in a way that is going to benefit you and in a way that you feel supported. So I'm just really happy that you've been able to negotiate, both of you, placements or opting in and out as you needed to. So certainly would highly recommend that students do that. Just because you read something somewhere that tells you how it should happen or what you can or can't do, I would always say absolutely do what these two amazing students have done and speak to your providers and your university.
Thank you, Birte.
And just a comment from me, Sally, for those listening, Sally can't see me. I can see all of you, but she can't see when I'm raising my hand.
Sorry, I can't see. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Absolutely. And Rachel, as you were speaking, I just got a sense of such solidarity. You know, when we are at crisis point and you as a student midwife on the front line with fellow midwives, I just got that strong sense of solidarity. Does that resonate with you?
I do feel that. I think for midwifery and, you know, the wider healthcare professions, we have to have solidarity and we have to look after each other at work. Our jobs are amazing, aren't they? And it's, you know, the best parts of life that we see, but also it can be difficult and it can be challenging. But I think it does all depend on how we treat each other and how we relate to each other. Yeah.
Thank you. Jacqui Williams, did you have any comments to add to our two superstars?
No, I think it just demonstrates how important the student midwives are there for women and the babies and their families at this time, and how they're also supporting that interprofessional team. So they are by being there, although this is absolutely unprecedented, they are still learning really essential skills and proficiencies which they will take forward through the rest of their careers. And well done to them all, really.
Thank you, fantastic. Would either of you like to add anything else before we start grilling the panel again? No?
May I?
You may, please do.
A source of support that's been really valuable for me throughout this time is allformaternity.com. It's owned by Sheena and Anna Byram, and they are providing so many resources for student midwives at this time. Whether you're opting in or opting out, there are a lot of resources there for you to keep your learning up if you're opting out, and to keep your practical skills surrounding how to care for women and birthing people during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's
fantastic. Thank you very much. That's absolutely super. Thank you, Alicia and Rachel. So kind of putting the panel back to and the pennies today. Alicia, I think you had a question, I think for myself and Jacqui, that Jacqui Williams, that Jacqui can probably answer slightly better than me, but we'll see how we go.
I think that was.
Was it you, Rachel? I'm so
sorry.
Sorry, poor Alicia waiting. Sorry, Rachel, that's for you.
No, so that's to both Sally and to Jacqui. It's just that a lot of students are concerned about their ability to achieve their NMC and EU requirements. For example, assisting 40 births. How will it affect students that haven't achieved this requirement at the moment, or will be unable to? Will they continue their placement until they achieve these numbers?
Shall I go first, Sally?
Yes, please, Jacqui.
I mean, from my midwifery education experience, I have every confidence that you will meet these numbers, and the fact that you're in placement for 6 months now, so it's an extended placement, you've got even more opportunity to meet those requirements. They do have to be still met because it is still an EU directive. And that hasn't changed during this time, and indeed it hasn't changed even though we in transition stage following Brexit. Your midwifery lecturers are very familiar with the needs of this requirement, and I have no doubt that your practice supervisors will be ensuring that you're there to get this experience. But I think it's about, if you have concerns, just talk through it with both your supervisors and your midwifery lecturers to make sure that you're on the labour ward when you need to be, and that you are getting that experience. But do have confidence. I have every confidence that you will get it. And if it doesn't quite work out, which happens in normal times, then things can be adjusted. Sally, did you want to pick up the bit about the financial support?
Yes, thank you. This is one of the things we were alluding to at the beginning about having further information for you on the gov.co website, and we'll direct you back to that, Rachel. But certainly in terms of the student loan company, this would count, and I think Jacqui, you'll be able to back me up on this, as an extension of your current academic year. So where your programme goes beyond 30 weeks and 3 days, they can assess your loan eligibility based on your personal circumstances. But that's quite a familiar pattern where students have to pause and defer anyway. I think that's probably that. Alicia, the next thing you were going to talk to Birte about was around first year students and the support they might get, but I think we may have covered that off earlier. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Oh no, I have heard some reports of some first years have been given laptops by their universities to support them with their remote learning, and that's been a really good, there's been really good response to that. But apart from that, I think we have covered it.
Thank you very much. And we did have a question. I think we may have lost Professor Dunkley-Bent at the moment from the...
No,
you're back, Jacqui. Oh, fantastic. I think Rachel's got a question for you, Jacqui. Thank you.
So another one of the questions that has been coming up from student midwives has been with the level of autonomy and responsibility that midwives have in certain areas, in particular the intrapartum areas. Students are asking, will they be required to be very independent, or will they continue to shadow a midwife as they do now as supernumerary students?
A really good question, Rachel, and obviously feeds some of the fear and anxiety that many students will have at this time. Totally understandable. I can 100% categorically state that the intention is that the student will interact in the clinical area as they always have done, and that means that they will have the supervision at the mentorship, the supervision that they would have had they not been in the COVID-19 coronavirus space. So absolutely, wherever the student happens to be that antenatal day assessment unit, community, intrapartum care on the labour ward, wherever they are in the theatre, nothing has changed in terms of level of supervision. The good thing, I think, in this space about student midwives, and you shared this actually in your experience, of going into an environment where you are known, where the midwives know you, where your current mentor or supervisor knows you, and therefore you will be tasked with undertaking maternity care that is commensurate with who you are and where you are at in your learning journey, in your experience journey, in your confidence journey. So that should continue, because our whole intention, of course, we want to support maternity services to be as safe as they can be and have a good experience, and that's why you're here as students, all of you. But the key thing is, in conjunction with that, is that you need to have and must be supported to have a good experience yourself, because in the absence of a good experience you won't have good learning, the anxiety and stress will take over, the competencies won't be met, and therefore that's a slippery slope. So it's within all our interests, least of all mums and babies, it's within all our interests to ensure that you have the support that you need. And I hope that message is out there for all student midwives across the 4 countries.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Anything, Birte or Jacqui, that you'd like to add to that?
It's Jacqui. I mean, I think we were very, very clear in our emergency standards albeit that we've given the universities the option to adopt the new supervision standards rather than so that means talking about that you'd have a practice supervisor, a practice assessor, as opposed to sign-off mentors, which gives a lot more flexibility in that approach. But we were very clear, whatever happened, that students must be supervised. And I've spent quite a lot of time over the last 2 to 3 weeks talking about these definitions, which we may not have used for a while, about direct and indirect supervision, because it's, as Jacqueline says, it's absolutely critical that you're supported during these 6 months to become confident as well as confident midwives to go on our register, and that supervision is absolutely key to that. So, you know, as you move in this 6-month phase, some of the final years, third years, will be perhaps more indirectly supervised, but absolutely still having that practice supervisor near to hand. It's about developing confidence cases perhaps, whereas there'll be some aspects of care you will absolutely need direct supervision because you haven't perhaps come across them very much or not at all. So supervision was absolutely fundamental to these emergency standards to ensure that you continue as a student midwife meeting your competencies and your proficiency so you can be signed off and enter our register.
Thank you, Jacqui. I think that clarity from the NMC will resonate really well with not only our students that are on the panel, but the students that are watching and the HEIs that are watching as well. So thank you for clarifying. That's really helpful. Rachael, sorry, you're on again because you wanted to ask Professor Dunkley-Bent another question.
Yeah, so, sorry, Jacqueline, I've got another question for you. This question you did actually touch on earlier when you were talking to Alicia about you know, home births and technology and changes and you know, evolving from this. So so apologies if it does cover the same things, but obviously a lot of students are training and learning lots about the evidence base behind midwifery continuity of carer. So obviously since COVID has become our priority, understandably lots of midwifery-led services have had to regroup and return to the hospital. So home births, for example, or even caseloading teams have changed. So what do you think the impact of this crisis will have on midwifery continuity of care remodeling considerations in the future?
Rachael, thank you again. This is actually it's a super question, I have to say. I'm the national lead for continuity in England, and obviously other countries have their own continuity of care leads. You know, we've worked so hard, and when I say we, all of us, you know, everybody on the panel, midwives on the front line, yourself as students have worked really, really hard to ensure that we have personal and safe care. And that's a key theme that is in all our policies across the UK. And as I mentioned before, because of the COVID space and the challenges, we have had to change. Services have had to change. Some haven't, but some have, to ensure safety for all. And that means that continuity of carer, where there weren't established continuity of carer teams, or there was a paucity of staffing, or there were other challenges and concerns, those services have had to suspend their progress. And as you quite rightly say, this is widespread and variable. What I would say is, and I'm delighted to be able to say this, we have already started, Rachael, our journey of recovery in terms of our thinking, in terms of our how do we continue pushing forward with policy post-COVID. So we've already started looking at that, and I've learned, you know, I've learned so much in this space about people, about leaders, about resilience, about challenge, about crises, and all that learning we will translate into helping services to reconnect, to resume, to restart for those that stopped, because many haven't. Many are still on, you might have seen on social media, some services are launching their continuity of carer teams in recent times. I've only just thanked somebody yesterday or today for launching yet another team. But for those that have had to change, and many have for very good reasons, as I've previously said, we are already thinking about how we can support them to kickstart those teams, to resume, to unsuspend services. And we are on trajectory, and we will pick up that trajectory to ensure that most women in 2021, at some point in 2021, because we've had a little bit of a pause here, but I'm confident that we will ensure that most women in 2021 will be having continuity of care. And why? Why do we say this? Because the evidence says it will improve outcomes for mums and babies and improve experiences for midwives, and more significantly, experiences for mums and babies who receive that care, but also the choice aspect, so home births. And already I can confidently say that in England, we had 71 out of 130 maternity providers suspending something within their service. And for the home birth space, we have seen a significant reversal of that suspension. So slowly but surely, services are unsuspending services that they suspended in the COVID space. Are we out of hot water? No, we're not. We can see that we're not. But I do have confidence in our leaders and managers, in our services, in the other countries in the UK as well, that they are keeping a close watching brief on this. And we will kickstart all these things, because what truly matters is safe and personal care with good experiences for mums and babies. We're all signed up to that. We've all got that written through our DNA, and we will make this difference for mums and babies by restarting at some point. So, killer question. I hope I've answered that in an appropriate way, and I'm sure you're going to challenge me if I haven't, Rachel.
I think you've answered that perfectly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm just going to come in and I don't need, I mean, Jacqueline has already answered very really well the question around continuity of carer. But what I would like to add is that I think this is a crisis, but I think there are also some really unique opportunities here, because I think as students, you may actually be exposed to some experiences that you might not see otherwise. So I think it's important that you make sure that you feel supported all the way through in what you do. But I also we hear some really exciting stories from midwives about how they're able to deliver midwifery-led care in different settings, how they're able to support women who've actually opted for a choice which may not be available to them, and how they've had to pull on their resilience and resources to really try and make the best for those women to have that experience that Jacqueline's talked about is so important. So I think there are aspects of your experience which will be different, because we're in a pandemic that obviously you can't get back. But I think there are some really experiences which are really exciting and which may actually give you a skill set that you might not have had otherwise. Not necessarily for the right reasons, but I have to say we hear great things, and our students are very innovative. Midwives are telling us of great ideas that students are giving them about how to deliver care in this time.
Thank you, Betty, and thank you both. I'm just sitting here thinking I should be watching my back for my job. Alicia, is there anything you'd like to add around those particular topics? Because I'm really keen to hear more from you both. Your experiences are really powerful, and it would be really nice for us just to hear a little bit more from both of you.
I find it really reassuring that the commitment to continuity of care remains, because there have been reports from some students that are worried about the impact that the pandemic has had on continuity of care. But the commitment to providing that for women throughout COVID, as far as we can and beyond, remains. So you really communicated that really well. So I'm very happy to hear that.
Thank you. Rachel, anything else from you?
No, nothing to add. I think it's like Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent said, as long as women are being provided with safe and you know, individualised care, that's what matters at the moment. But it's good to know, I think, from a student perspective, the plans for the future as well. So thank you for those answers.
Thank you very much. I think we've had a really useful discussion. We've heard lots of really innovative and inspiring things, and I feel I've got a very warm place in my heart now before we all head off on a Friday evening. I'm aware that we haven't covered all of the questions that we thought we were going to, but we will certainly pick up on that, and we'll make sure that we've covered the questions that you've both brought from your student community as well, because I know a lot of those questions you're doing representing others using your student voice. So I think if any of the panel have anything else they'd like to ask either Rachael or Alicia, let me know. If not, I'm going to hand back over to Mark to round up for us.
Sally, could I just say one thing to the audience?
Please do, Jacqui.
I would say this is a moment in time. You will continue to learn skills which you probably never thought you would learn, but they will be absolutely reflected potentially in your long-term midwifery practice. I want to say a huge thank you from the Nursing and Midwifery Council for all the work you're doing during this time in all the 4 countries across the UK, delivering, making a difference to women, but importantly ensuring that they keep safe the women, the babies and their families. And next Tuesday is International Day of the Midwife. It will be a rather different celebration, but still we've got a lot to be thankful for and a lot to celebrate. So I look forward to celebrating, albeit remotely, with you all.
Fantastic, Jacqui, and thank you so much for your contribution. Birte, any final comments from you?
Just to echo what Jacqui has just said, huge thank you to both of you for coming on today, but also just the student community in general, because this is a difficult time, and I just think you have all stepped up in one way or another, and the way you're listening to what your student community, Rachael through her role as the chair of the Royal College of Midwife Student Midwife Forum, and Alicia through her blog and her connection reaching throughout the world, I think is amazing. And anything we can do to support you, of course we will do, and do come and talk to us if there are things that we think we can help you with to make sure that your experience and your time as a student, your learning is everything it needs to be for you. But thank you so much.
Thank you also, Betty. And Jacqueline, final word for you before we hand over to Mark?
Just to say, I mean, ditto with regards to what my colleagues have said, and also, you know, just a big thank you. This is this time we will never forget, ever, and you are a part of history in the making in terms of keeping our services going. You know, we're standing united together, we're moving forward, and I would just say to you, student midwives, wherever you are, whatever you've chosen, whichever part of the system that you're in, we are in this together. And a big thank you. And on the cusp of International Day of the Midwives, because it's an opportunity that I won't have, happy International Day of the Midwives.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And thank you all so much, and thank you very much for our support team also keeping this running so smoothly. Mark, over to you for the final word. Oh, have we got Mark with us? I might have to do the final word. Mark, are you on mute? Okay, I will take this opportunity until we get Mark back, just to echo everything my colleagues have said, to wish you all well in this period, to wish you all well with your continued education and training. We look forward to seeing how you grow and develop, and the massive contribution that you're all going to make to the midwifery profession and to nursing and midwifery, and more importantly to your friends, I'm so sorry, I can say friends and family, I sound like the Queen, to your women that you care for, and their families, partners and their babies, of course. Oh, okay, 1 minute. Oh, Mark's still on mute.
Off mute now.
Off mute.
Thank
you. Welcome back, and over to you.
I was speaking to the nation. Well, I wasn't. I was actually speaking to the cat. So anyway, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to what has been a phenomenal webinar tonight, and a huge thanks to each and every one of the panelists that have been on tonight. There's some fantastic questions, and you know, I'm really, and you should be extremely proud. Our 2 student midwives, Rachael and Alicia, who've done a sterling job tonight. Fantastic, holding your senior leaders to account with very difficult questions. I love that. That's That's great. But also you've shown what phenomenal leaders you are personally, and also talked powerfully about your own personal journeys to become midwives, and also the kind of, as Jacqui said, the nature and the challenges that this current pandemic is creating for many people. But also what I'd be impressed at is how everybody on this webinar today has talked so much about the highest professional standards of training and education of midwifery, but also importantly the focus on safety and quality for mums and communities up and down the country. And I'd just like to finish and say a huge thank you to the panelists. I think you've got today a real sense of how the student midwifery community and system leaders have come together during this time of challenge and crisis to really focus in on the needs of students, and importantly what more we can do to support you in practice. So I know that there are usually lots and lots of questions that come up as a result of these, and we are still running our Facebook pages, so there'll be lots of opportunities to answer questions like that, and I'm sure colleagues who are on other avenues of social media will be able to answer questions. I know Rachael and Lissy, I'm sure your timelines are full of loads of great comments and questions from your student colleagues. It's just great to see that. We'll have our HEE midwifery specific page up today, which has obviously got where we've got loads of information. Our Royal College of Midwives and NMC colleagues have also got really dedicated pages and information that you can go and access if there are any things that you want to check on there. Just to re-say what what Jacqui, our Chief Midwifery Officer, has said. It's the International Day of the Midwife next Tuesday, which is a phenomenal day to celebrate the impact you make on families. And just a massive thank you to those that have tuned in tonight. So a huge thank you to the team that have supported the development of this webinar. It is being recorded, so we will have that loaded up later on for those colleagues who haven't been able to join us tonight. I wish you all the very best for this evening, and also some rest and relaxation, I hope, what is during a very busy time for all of you. So thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.